The dust cloud on the horizon meant only one thing. Another wagon was leaving Newton, Kansas, and Catherine Harper knew. It carried the last family who had promised to help her through the winter of 1878. She stood on the porch of her weathered homestead, her calloused hands gripping the rough wood railing as she watched her final thread of hope disappear into the prairie, leaving her alone with 5 children under the age of 10, and a farm that demanded more than one woman could possibly give. Her husband Thomas had been dead for 3 months, kicked in the chest by a spooked horse while breaking in a new stallion for a neighbor, and Catherine had learned quickly that sympathy lasted only as long as it was convenient. The neighbors had brought casseroles and kind words for the first few weeks. Then gradually their visits had stopped, their own survival taking precedence over charity. At 26 years old, Catherine found herself responsible for 9-year-old Mary, 7-year-old twins Benjamin and Samuel, 4-year-old little Thomas, and 18-month-old Elizabeth. With winter approaching and half the crop still unharvested in the fields, she had tried everything. She had attempted to hire help, but the few ranch hands willing to work for a widow expected payment she could not afford. She had considered selling the land, but without Thomas to vouch for its value, the offers that came were insultingly low, barely enough to see them through a single season. She had even swallowed her pride and asked the bank for an extension on the loan Thomas had taken to buy their breeding cattle. But Mr. Winters had looked at her with cold eyes and told her that a woman alone could not possibly manage a spread this size, and perhaps she should consider more realistic options. The sunset painted the Kansas sky in shades of crimson and gold as Catherine walked back into the house, where Mary was attempting to keep the younger children occupied while supper cooked. The girl had grown up too fast in the past 3 months, her childhood sacrificed to necessity, and Catherine felt the weight of that loss almost as heavily as she felt Thomas's absence. "Mama, Benjamin hit Samuel again," Mary reported wearily, her thin face smudged with flour from helping with the bread. "I did not. He took my wooden horse that Papa made. It is not yours, it is mine. Papa made it for me." Catherine closed her eyes and drew a deep breath, summoning patience she did not feel. "Boys, enough. You will both lose the horse if you cannot share it. Now wash up for supper." Little Thomas, named for his father, tugged at her worn skirt. "Mama, when is Papa coming home?" The question struck her heart like a blade every time he asked it, which was daily. At 4 years old, he could not quite grasp the permanence of death, and Catherine had to fight back tears as she knelt down to his level. "Papa is in heaven, sweetheart. Remember, we talked about this. But I want him here." "I know, baby, I know." She pulled him close, breathing in the little boy smell of him, dirt and sunshine and innocence, and wondered how she was going to keep them all fed and warm and safe. The next morning brought a frost that killed the last of her kitchen garden, and Catherine stood among the blackened tomato plants feeling defeat settle into her bones. She had managed to preserve some vegetables, but not enough, never enough. The cellar held perhaps 2 months of food if she rationed carefully, and the winter stretched ahead like an impossible mountain to climb. She was carrying a basket of the salvageable vegetables back to the house when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. Her first instinct was fear. A woman alone was vulnerable in ways she had never considered when Thomas was alive, but then she recognized the rider as Patrick Anderson, the cowboy who worked the massive triple-bar ranch that bordered her property to the west. She had seen him occasionally over the years, always polite, always respectful, but they had never exchanged more than brief greetings. He dismounted with the easy grace of a man who had spent his life in the saddle, removing his hat as he approached. He was perhaps 30 years old, tall and lean with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that needed cutting. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, and they held something that looked like genuine concern as he nodded to her. "Mrs. Harper, I hope I am not intruding." "Mr. Anderson." She set down the basket, suddenly conscious of her appearance, her dress patched and faded, her hair escaping its pins. "What brings you out this way?" He glanced toward the fields, where the unharvested corn stood in silent accusation. "I have been watching your situation, madam, and I hope you will not take offense, but it seems to me you could use some help." Pride flared hot in her chest. "I am managing." "I did not mean to suggest otherwise." His voice was calm, measured. "But managing and thriving are two different things, and those children deserve better than just managing. You need a partner. Let me help." Catherine stared at him, uncertain whether to be insulted or hopeful. "I cannot pay you, Mr. Anderson. I have tried to hire help, but I am not asking for pay." He met her eyes directly. "I am proposing a partnership. You need help running this place, and I need land of my own. I have been saving for years, working for wages, but land prices keep climbing beyond my reach. If we were to marry, I could help you keep this farm, and in return, I would finally have a stake in something permanent." The word marry hit her like a physical blow. "Mr. Anderson, my husband has been dead only 3 months. I know, and I am not suggesting anything inappropriate." "This would be a business arrangement, Mrs. Harper. Separate rooms, no expectations beyond running the farm and raising the children. You would maintain your independence, and I would simply be a partner to help shoulder the work." She wanted to refuse immediately. The very idea felt like a betrayal of Thomas's memory. But as she looked back at the house, she saw Mary's face at the window, watching with worried eyes that belonged on someone much older. She thought of winter coming, of the empty cellar and the unpaid loan and 5 children who depended on her for everything. "I need time to think about this." "Of course. But winter is coming fast, Mrs. Harper, and that corn needs to come in soon or it will be ruined. Even if you decide against my proposal, let me at least help with the harvest. No strings attached." Catherine studied his face, searching for ulterior motives, but found only steady sincerity. "Why would you do that?" "Because it is the right thing to do." He put his hat back on. "And because I know what it is like to be alone and struggling. My own mother raised 3 of us by herself after my father died in the war. I remember what that looked like." Something in his voice, a old pain carefully controlled, made her decision. "All right, you can help with the harvest. But I am making no promises beyond that. That is all I am asking." He gestured toward the corn. "I can start today if you like. I have permission from my boss to take some time for this." They worked side by side for the rest of that day, and Catherine was astonished at how much easier everything became with another pair of hands. Patrick moved through the work with quiet efficiency, never complaining, never demanding attention or praise. When the children came out to see what was happening, he greeted them with gentle courtesy, learning their names and treating even little Thomas with the respect usually reserved for adults. "You are the cowboy who works for Mr. Reynolds," Benjamin announced importantly. "That I am." "Have you boys ever been on a cattle drive?" Both twins shook their heads, eyes wide with interest, and Patrick smiled. "Well, it is hard work, but there is nothing quite like sleeping under the stars with thousands of cattle around you. Maybe someday I can tell you some stories about it." "Can you tell us now?" Samuel begged. "Samuel, Mr. Anderson is busy," Catherine interjected, but Patrick waved away her concern. "I can work and talk at the same time. Let me tell you about the time we had to cross a river in flood stage. With the water running so high and fast, we thought we would lose the whole herd." The boys followed him like puppies as he returned to the field, and Catherine watched as he narrated a vivid story of adventure and danger while never slowing his work pace. Even Mary ventured out, drawn by the sound of male laughter that had been absent from their home for too long. That evening, Catherine insisted Patrick stay for supper. It seemed the least she could do after his help. She had little to offer beyond beans and cornbread, but he accepted the simple meal with such genuine appreciation that she felt a small warmth kindle in her chest, something that might have been hope. "This is delicious, Mrs. Harper. You are a fine cook." "Mama makes the best cornbread in all of Kansas," little Thomas declared loyally, and Patrick nodded seriously. "I believe you are right about that." After the children were in bed, Catherine and Patrick sat on the porch in the cool evening air. The stars spread across the sky in brilliant profusion, unmarred by any city lights, and for a moment they simply existed in companionable silence. "Why are you really doing this, Mr. Anderson?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dark prairie. "I told you the truth. I want land of my own, a family, something permanent. I am 30 years old, Mrs. Harper, and I have spent my entire adult life working other people's cattle on other people's land. I have watched men younger than me marry and build lives while I just kept drifting. When I heard about your situation, I saw an opportunity that could benefit us both. And you expect nothing from me? No, wifely duties." His voice was firm. "I expect partnership and respect, nothing more. If you were to agree to this arrangement, I would sleep in the barn, or we could add a room onto the house. Whatever makes you comfortable. And if someday you decided you wanted more, or if you wanted to end the arrangement, we could discuss it like adults." Catherine studied his profile in the starlight. "You are an unusual man, Mr. Anderson. Patrick, if we are going to be partners, you should call me Patrick." "Catherine," she offered in return, and felt something shift between them, some subtle acknowledgement of possibility. Over the next 2 weeks, Patrick returned every day to help with the harvest. Catherine found herself watching for his arrival each morning, found herself noticing the way he interacted with her children, patient and kind, never dismissive of their questions or needs. He fixed the broken pump at the well without being asked, repaired the sagging porch step that had threatened to collapse, and taught Benjamin and Samuel how to properly stack firewood so it would season correctly. "You are making it very hard to refuse your proposal," Catherine admitted one afternoon as they worked together in the barn, organizing the harvested corn. Patrick paused, a sack of corn in his hands. "Is that what you are planning to do? Refuse?" "I do not know." She sank down onto a hay bale, suddenly exhausted. "Part of me knows it makes perfect sense. You have proven yourself to be capable and trustworthy, and God knows I need help. But another part of me feels like I would be betraying Thomas, like I would be giving up and taking the easy way out." "There is nothing easy about what you have been doing." Patrick set down the corn and sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "You have been trying to do the work of 3 people while grieving your husband and keeping 5 children alive and safe. That is not weakness, Catherine. That is strength, but even the strongest people need help sometimes. What if I cannot ever love you?" The question emerged before she could stop it. "What if I am always comparing you to Thomas? Then we would be business partners who care about each other's well-being, and that would be enough." He turned to look at her. "I am not asking you to love me, Catherine. I am asking you to let me help you build something worthwhile. If love comes later, then that would be a blessing I did not expect. If it does not, I would still count myself fortunate to be part of a family and have a place to call home." She searched his face and found only honesty. "You would truly be content with that. I would rather have companionship and respect without love than continue drifting alone. Wouldn't you?" Catherine thought about the long, lonely nights, the constant fear, the weight of being solely responsible for 5 small lives. She thought about Mary's worried face and the twins' growing wildness without a father's guidance and little Thomas asking every day when Papa would come home. She thought about the approaching winter and the bank's demands and the knowledge that she was slowly drowning despite her best efforts. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I would." "Then marry me, Catherine. Let me help you." She drew a shaky breath. "All right, but I have conditions." "Name them." "We maintain separate sleeping arrangements until and unless I say otherwise. You will discuss all major decisions about the farm and the children with me. We will be equal partners. And if this does not work, if we find we cannot live together peacefully, we will find a way to separate without hurting the children." Patrick extended his hand. "Agreed. Do we have a deal?" Catherine placed her hand in his, feeling the callous strength of his grip, the warmth of his skin. "We have a deal." They were married 3 days later in a quiet ceremony at the Newton church, with only the children and the minister present. Catherine wore her best dress, a dark blue calico that had seen better days, and Patrick wore a clean shirt and his Sunday trousers. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Patrick pressed a chaste kiss to her cheek, and Catherine felt tears sting her eyes for reasons she could not quite name. The children's reactions were mixed. Mary watched everything with solemn, assessing eyes, clearly uncertain about this stranger who was now their stepfather. The twins were excited about having a man around again, someone who could teach them ranch work and tell them stories. Little Thomas was confused but willing to accept Patrick because Mama said it was all right. Baby Elizabeth, blessedly oblivious to the complications, simply smiled at everyone impartially. Patrick moved his few belongings into the barn that evening, setting up a simple sleeping area in the tack room. Catherine watched from the house as he carried in his bedroll and the small trunk that held his worldly possessions, and felt a strange mixture of relief and guilt. Relief that she would not have to face the winter alone, guilt that she had married a man she did not love. But love had not been part of their agreement, she reminded herself. This was a partnership, a practical solution to desperate circumstances. That would have to be enough. The first weeks of their arrangement were awkward as they learned to navigate their new reality. Patrick rose before dawn to handle the livestock and heavy farm work. Catherine managed the house and the children and the endless cooking and cleaning. They worked together to finish preparing for winter, smoking meat and preserving food and repairing buildings before the cold weather arrived in earnest. Slowly, a routine emerged. Patrick ate breakfast and supper with the family, helped the children with their evening chores, and then retired to the barn while Catherine put the little ones to bed. On Sundays, they attended church together, presenting a united front to the curious and sometimes judgmental townspeople who whispered about the widow who had remarried so quickly. "Let them talk," Patrick said when Catherine expressed frustration about the gossip. "We know the truth of our situation, and that is all that matters." The children gradually warmed to Patrick, won over by his steady presence and genuine interest in their lives. He taught the twins how to ride properly, spending patient hours in the corral as they learned to control their mother's old mare. He helped Mary with her arithmetic, explaining concepts in ways that made sense to her practical mind. He carried little Thomas on his shoulders while doing chores, and even coaxed smiles from baby Elizabeth. Catherine watched these interactions with a confusion of emotions. She was grateful for his help, appreciative of his kindness to her children, but also felt a painful reminder of what they had lost. Thomas had been playful and affectionate, quick to laugh and slow to anger. Patrick was more reserved, thoughtful and measured in his responses. It was not better or worse, simply different, and Catherine found herself struggling to accept the difference. One evening in late November, a blizzard blew in without warning. Catherine was outside bringing in laundry when the temperature suddenly plummeted and the wind began to howl. Patrick appeared beside her immediately, helping gather the frozen clothes. "Get the children inside and away from the windows," he shouted over the wind. "I need to secure the animals. It is too dangerous. The livestock will die if they are not sheltered." He was already running toward the barn, and Catherine's heart seized with fear as the snow began to fall so thick she could barely see him. She got the children inside and lit extra lamps, trying to keep her fear hidden as the storm raged outside. An hour passed, then two, and Patrick did not return. Catherine paced the floor, imagining him lost in the whiteout, frozen and alone, and realized with startling clarity that the thought of losing him caused genuine pain in her chest. When he finally stumbled through the door, covered in snow and shaking with cold, Catherine felt such relief that she acted without thinking, rushing to help him out of his frozen coat, chafing his hands between her own. "You foolish man, I thought you were dead." "Sorry," he managed through chattering teeth. "Took longer than expected. Animals are safe, though." She made him sit by the stove, wrapping him in blankets and forcing hot coffee into his hands. The children gathered around, even Mary showing open concern, and for the first time, they felt like a real family rather than a collection of individuals sharing space. The blizzard lasted 3 days, and Patrick could not return to the barn. Catherine made a bed for him on the floor near the stove, and they all huddled together in the main room, keeping the fire burning and telling stories to pass the time. Patrick had an endless supply of tales from his years as a cowboy, stories of cattle drives and wild horses and the vast, untamed country he had traveled. The children listened with rapt attention, and Catherine found herself equally captivated, not just by the stories but by the man telling them. She noticed things she had been too busy or too guarded to see before: the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness of his hands despite their roughness, the patience he showed even when the children asked the same question repeatedly, the quiet competence with which he handled every challenge. On the third night of the blizzard, after the children were finally asleep, Catherine and Patrick sat by the dying fire, speaking in low voices. "Thank you," Catherine said softly, "for everything you have done, for keeping us safe." "That is what family does," Patrick replied, and the simple statement made her throat tight with emotion. "Is that what we are now? A family?" He looked at her, firelight reflecting in his eyes. "I would like to think so, but that is your decision to make, Catherine. I am just keeping my end of our bargain. You have done far more than that. You have given the children stability and hope. You have given me rest and support. I did not expect to feel grateful for this arrangement, but I am. Just grateful." His voice was careful, as if he was afraid of her answer. Catherine took a breath, acknowledging what she had been denying for weeks. "No, not just grateful. I find myself looking forward to seeing you each morning. I miss your presence when you are in the barn at night. I worry about you when you are out in bad weather. I do not know if that is love, Patrick, but it is something more than simple partnership." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "I have been falling in love with you since the day I first saw you trying to fix that well pump by yourself. Determination written in every line of your body. I did not propose because of that. My offer was genuine and businesslike, but I would be lying if I said I did not hope that maybe, someday, you might come to care for me too." "I am afraid," Catherine admitted. "Afraid of betraying Thomas's memory, afraid of being hurt again. Afraid of so many things. Fear is natural, But you are the bravest person I know, Catherine Harper Anderson. You have faced impossible odds and kept fighting. Do not let fear stop you from accepting happiness if it is what you want." She studied their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, both scarred by hard work and hardship. "What if I am not ready? Then I will wait. I will wait as long as you need." His voice was steady, certain. "I am not going anywhere." That night, Catherine lay awake long after Patrick had fallen asleep near the fire, listening to the wind howl outside and the soft breathing of her children around her. She thought about Thomas, about the love they had shared, the life they had built together. She thought about the pain of losing him, the desperate loneliness that had followed. And she thought about Patrick, who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had been too proud to voice, offering help without judgment, partnership without demands, and now, love without expectations. Thomas would want her to be happy, she realized. He would want the children to have a father figure, the farm to prosper, his family to be safe and cared for. Holding on to grief out of some misplaced sense of loyalty did not honor his memory, it only hurt the people he had loved. When the storm finally broke on the fourth morning, the world outside was transformed into a sparkling white wonderland. The children rushed outside to play in the snow, and Catherine watched from the porch as Patrick helped them build a snowman, his laughter ringing out clear and joyful in the cold air. That evening, after supper was cleared and the children were in bed, Catherine walked out to the barn where Patrick was checking on the animals. "Patrick," he turned, surprise evident on his face, "is everything all right? I do not want you sleeping in the barn anymore." Something flickered in his eyes, hope mixed with uncertainty. "Catherine, I do not want you to feel pressured. I am not." She stepped closer. "I am choosing this. I am choosing you, choosing us, not because I have to, but because I want to." He closed the distance between them slowly, cupping her face in his hands with such tenderness that tears spilled down her cheeks. "Are you certain? I am certain that you have shown me more kindness and respect in 2 months than some people receive in a lifetime. I am certain that my children adore you and that you treat them like they are your own. I am certain that when I thought you were lost in that blizzard, my heart nearly stopped. And I am certain that Thomas would approve of you because you are exactly the kind of man he was, good and honest and strong." Patrick kissed her then, a real kiss, gentle at first and then deeper as she responded, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. It felt different than kissing Thomas, but it felt right, like coming home after a long journey. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I will spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of you." "You already have," Catherine replied, and meant it with her whole heart. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and that night Patrick slept in the main bedroom for the first time, holding Catherine close as she finally allowed herself to grieve fully for what she had lost and embrace what she had found. The winter passed more easily with Patrick truly integrated into the family. He moved his belongings into the house, took his place at the head of the table, and became not just a partner but a husband in every sense of the word. The children bloomed under his attention, Mary's worried expression gradually relaxing, the twins growing confident and capable as Patrick taught them ranch work, little Thomas finally stopping his daily questions about his father as he accepted Patrick into his life. In the spring, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complicated mixture of joy and guilt, another reminder that her life was moving forward, that she was building something new rather than preserving something old. Patrick found her crying in the garden one afternoon and sat beside her without a word, simply offering his presence until she was ready to talk. "I feel like I am erasing him," Catherine said finally. "Every day I love you more. Every day the pain of losing Thomas fades a little further, and it feels like a betrayal. Love is not finite, Catherine. Having room in your heart for me does not mean you love Thomas any less. And this baby, he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach, is not a replacement for anything. This is new life, new hope. Thomas's children will always be his children, and they will always remember him because we will make sure of it. But this child will be ours, proof that beautiful things can grow from grief. His words settled something deep inside her, and Catherine leaned into his embrace, finally allowing herself to fully accept the future they were creating together. Their son was born in October of 1879, a healthy baby boy with Patrick's dark hair and Catherine's green eyes. They named him James, and the older children were ecstatic about the new addition to the family. Mary proved to be a natural helper with the baby. The twins were fascinated by their tiny brother, and little Thomas took his role as big brother very seriously. Catherine watched Patrick hold his son for the first time, saw the wonder and love in his face, and felt her heart expand even further. This man who had started as a convenient solution to an impossible problem had become the center of her world, her partner in every way that mattered. The farm prospered under their joint management. Patrick's knowledge of cattle combined with Catherine's determination and practical skills created a successful operation. They added to their herd, improved the buildings, and even hired a seasonal hand to help during the busiest times. The bank loan was paid off, and for the first time since Thomas's death, Catherine felt secure. On their first anniversary, Patrick presented her with a gift, a simple gold locket on a chain. "Open it," he urged, and Catherine gasped when she saw what was inside. On one side was a small photograph of Thomas holding baby Mary. On the other was a photograph of their family as it was now, all 7 of them together. "Patrick, how did you—" "I went through your things with Mary's help to find a good photograph of Thomas. I hope you do not mind. I wanted you to know that I do not expect you to forget him or pretend he never existed. He was your first love, the father of your children, and he will always be part of our family story." Catherine threw her arms around him, crying and laughing at the same time. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I think we found each other," Patrick replied. "And I am the lucky one, Catherine. You have given me everything I ever dreamed of, a home, a family, a purpose. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible." That night, as they lay in bed with baby James sleeping in his cradle nearby, Catherine reflected on the incredible journey of the past year and a half. She had gone from desperate widow to thriving wife and mother, from barely surviving to genuinely living. The grief over Thomas would always be part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had learned that the heart was capable of holding multiple truths at once, that she could love Thomas and Patrick both, that she could honor the past while embracing the future. That strength sometimes meant accepting help rather than struggling alone. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. They had 2 more children, daughters born in 1881 and 1883, rounding out their family to 8 children in total. The farm continued to grow and prosper. Mary grew into a beautiful young woman who eventually married a neighboring rancher's son. The twins became expert horsemen who helped run the cattle operation. Little Thomas, who eventually insisted on being called Tom to distinguish himself from his late father, grew into a thoughtful boy who loved books as much as ranch work. Baby Elizabeth grew from a toddler into a charming little girl who wrapped everyone around her finger. Patrick proved to be not just a good husband but an exceptional father. He never tried to replace Thomas in the older children's memories, but he created his own relationship with each of them, understanding their individual needs and personalities. He told them stories about their father based on things Catherine had shared, ensuring that Thomas remained a real presence in their lives rather than fading into abstraction. On quiet evenings, Catherine and Patrick would sit on their porch, watching the sun set over their land, surrounded by the sounds of their children playing. Patrick would take her hand and she would lean against his shoulder, marveling at how a moment of desperate need had led to such profound happiness. "You ever regret it?" Patrick asked one such evening. "Marrying me so quickly, accepting my help?" "Never," Catherine replied without hesitation. "You were right that day in the barn, Patrick. You said I needed a partner and you offered to help, but you gave me so much more than that. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave my children a father who loves them. You gave me a love I never expected to find again. You saved us in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Patrick said softly. "I was just drifting before I met you, existing but not really living. You gave me purpose and belonging. You made me a better man." As they sat together watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, their youngest daughter's laughter floating through the open windows behind them, Catherine felt a deep sense of peace. Her life had not turned out the way she had once imagined, but it had turned out exactly as it was meant to be. She had learned that love could come twice in a lifetime, that family was built not just through blood but through choice and commitment, and that sometimes the best things emerged from the hardest times. The farm that she and Thomas had started, the land they had struggled to tame, now thrived under her and Patrick's care. It would pass to their children and grandchildren, a legacy built on loss and redemption, grief and joy, endings and new beginnings. And every day, Catherine thanked God for the cowboy who had appeared on her horizon when she needed him most, the man who had said, "You need a partner, let me help," and had meant it with his whole heart. Years later, when their grandchildren asked how they met, Catherine and Patrick would smile at each other, remembering that desperate autumn day when two lonely people had reached out and found each other. "Your grandmother needed help," Patrick would say, "and I was lucky enough to be the one to offer it." "But it was more than that," Catherine would add, squeezing his hand. "He showed me that it was all right to accept help, that asking for support was not weakness but wisdom. And in accepting his help, I found love again when I thought that part of my life was over." Their story became a family legend, told and retold through generations, a testament to the power of kindness and the resilience of the human heart. The farm remained in the family for decades, a symbol of what could be built when people worked together, when they chose partnership over pride and hope over fear. On their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Catherine and Patrick renewed their vows in the same small Newton church where they had first married. This time, Catherine wore a beautiful new dress that Patrick had ordered from Kansas City, and Patrick wore a suit that made him look distinguished and handsome. When they spoke their vows, there was no awkwardness or uncertainty, only deep love and gratitude. "25 years ago I made you a promise," Patrick said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I promised to be your partner, to help you build a life. What I did not know then was that you would give me so much more than I ever gave you. You have been my love, my inspiration, my reason for everything. I would marry you again every single day if I could." Catherine smiled through happy tears. "25 years ago I was drowning and you threw me a lifeline. I thought I was accepting a business arrangement, but I was really accepting the greatest gift of my life. You have shown me that the heart is capable of holding infinite love, that endings can become beginnings, and that sometimes the answer to our prayers comes in the most unexpected ways. I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I will love you even more tomorrow." As they kissed, their children cheered and their grandchildren giggled, and Catherine felt the circle of love that surrounded them. Love that had started with desperation and help, but had grown into something magnificent and lasting. Patrick Anderson had been true to his word that autumn day in 1878. He had been a partner in every sense, sharing the work and the worry, the triumphs and the setbacks. But he had also become so much more. A beloved husband, a devoted father, a man who had proven that real love was not just about passion, but about showing up every day, about choosing commitment even when it was difficult, about building something lasting through patience and dedication. And Catherine had learned that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. She had survived devastating loss, had found the courage to accept help, and had opened her heart to love again. She had raised 8 children, built a successful farm, and created a family that was bound together not just by blood but by genuine affection and respect. As the party continued around them, Patrick pulled Catherine close and whispered in her ear, "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who did not have much to offer except hard work and an honest heart." "You offered me everything that mattered," Catherine replied, resting her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. "You offered me partnership and help when I was too proud to ask for it. And in accepting your offer, I found my way home." The Kansas prairie stretched endlessly around them, the same land that had witnessed Catherine's despair and determination, the same sky that had watched Patrick ride toward an uncertain future. But now that land was fertile and productive, their home warm and full of life, their future bright with promise. They had taken a practical arrangement born of necessity and transformed it into something beautiful and enduring, proof that love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, and that sometimes the best things in life came from simply saying yes when someone offered to help. As the sun set on their anniversary celebration, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Catherine looked around at the life she and Patrick had built together and felt nothing but gratitude. They had started as strangers bound by necessity, but they had become partners, lovers, best friends, and soulmates. Their story was not a fairy tale, it was better than that. It was real and hard-won and absolutely true. And every morning when she woke beside Patrick, Catherine gave thanks for the day he had ridden into her life and said those simple, life-changing words, "You need a partner. Let me help."